What did Tieu Ca have to sacrifice to become the strong woman she is today? In this life, no one becomes strong by chance. No one walks through storms without being knocked down at least once, and no woman becomes mature, resilient, and full of determination without first enduring the deepest of sorrows. Tieu Ca's story is living proof of that. Tieu Ca, a girl with a pure heart and the simplest of dreams, a small house, a kind husband, an adorable child, and peaceful days with her family. But life didn't turn out as she had hoped. She entered marriage filled with hope, only to realize too soon that her so-called husband's home was filled with coldness and injustice. Even while pregnant, Tieu Ca had to work tirelessly, without a single word of care from her in-laws. On rainy, stormy afternoons, she curled up in a shabby kitchen, cooking meals with the cheapest ingredients, fighting back nausea from morning sickness while wiping away tears caused by hurtful insults and unjust blame. She wasn't treated like a daughter-in-law, but more like an unpaid servant. Not long after giving birth, while other women were allowed to rest, cared for by their mothers or families, Tieu Ca had to manage everything on her own. Holding her baby in one arm while doing laundry and cooking with the other, she endured not only the emotional coldness of her husband, but also the cruelty of her mother-in-law and the terrifying indifference of the entire family. But the cruelty didn't end there. When her baby was just 3 months old, still fragile and helpless, Tieu Ca was heartlessly thrown out of the house by her mother-in-law over a petty argument, or perhaps for no reason at all. She stood outside the gate in the pouring rain, holding her baby with no money, no clothes, and no one to turn to. It was the kind of moment that would break most people, but not Tieu Ca. She cried, not to curse her fate, but to say goodbye to a painful past and welcome a new beginning. Starting from zero, she built a small world for herself and her child with her own calloused hands. She learned to stretch every coin, took on whatever job she could find, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, carrying heavy loads, all with her child strapped to her back. People mocked her, looked down on her, but not once did she give up. Many nights, when her child had a fever, she stayed awake by their side, too afraid to cry, because she knew, if the mother breaks down, what will become of the child? It was that boundless love for her child that transformed Tieu Ca from a fragile girl into a warrior mother, one who dared to walk through life's cruelty just to protect her child's smile. And today, when we look back on her journey, we no longer see a broken woman. We see a strong mother, full of compassion, who nothing could defeat. Tieu Ca kong kan fei chung min bat ku jiao gicho bat ki ai. She has already proven everything, with her life, with her tears, and with a heart that never gave in to fate. It seemed like happiness had finally returned, but fate itself struck again with a blade that pierced her heart. After years of struggling alone, fighting to support her child, Tieu Ca finally began to stabilize her life through nothing but her own hands and relentless will. Every coin she earned was paid for in sweat, tears, and sleepless nights. Though she was poor and worn down, at least she and her child had each other, and in her heart, hope still remained. Then one day, the man she once called her husband, the one she had waited for through 2 long years while he served his prison sentence, returned. She had believed that after everything, their little family would be whole again, that they would finally have a real reunion for the new year. No more nights spent holding her child in the dark, crying alone. They started over, slowly, step by step. She smiled as she watched him hold their child in his arms as the three of them shared warm, simple meals together. She truly believed that perhaps, at last, heaven had shown her some mercy, but that happiness, brief as the first light of dawn, was soon eclipsed by dark clouds. One afternoon, exhausted after carrying heavy baskets of goods back from the market, she turned onto the familiar road leading home. And then she froze. Before her eyes was a scene that made her heart stop. Her husband sitting in his motorbike, laughing and speaking intimately with a young woman she had never seen. The girl rested her head on his shoulder like someone long familiar. And the motorbike, the one he once promised would be used only for taking her and their child to school, was now being used to carry another woman. She stood frozen in the rain, lips trembling, her voice caught in her throat. "Who is she?" He turned around, momentarily startled, but quickly regained his composure. "A new colleague. She doesn't have a bike, so I gave her a lift. It's nothing you need to worry about." His answer was light, casual, but to Tieu Ca, it cut like a knife, cold and deep. She tried to smile, though her voice had already begun to quiver. "Then, why didn't you tell me first? Just a quick message so I wouldn't be caught off guard like this. Anyway, go ahead and take your colleague home. I'll head back on my own." He looked away in discomfort, and she turned, walking silently into the rain where the falling drops mixed with her tears, bitter and salty. That night, she held her child close as they slept, her heart aching as if something precious had just slipped away. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, but she understood trust is like glass. Once shattered, even if repaired, it is never quite whole again. It was the second time and the one that truly broke her heart. Though she tried to forget the first unsettling scene, Tieu Ca kept convincing herself to believe in him. She told herself, "He wouldn't betray me. It must have been a misunderstanding, as I need to trust him one more time." But reality doesn't let us live forever in blind hope. That day, under a soft sun, she returned from the market with a bundle of vegetables, a few eggs, and a packet of instant noodles, the simple things she had grown used to saving every penny for, just to feed her little family. As she turned onto a narrow road near the industrial park, her eyes happened to fall on a roadside drink stall, and then she froze. Her husband's familiar motorbike was parked right outside the cafe. Her heart tightened, a chilling instinct gripping her chest like a cold hand. She walked slowly, each step heavy with unease. And then the moment her eyes reached inside the cafe, the sight struck her like a cruel blow in broad daylight. He was sitting across from that woman. No more distance, no more caution. They laughed and talked intimately, and in that very moment, the woman gently spooned a mouthful of dessert and fed it to him. He didn't resist. Instead, he looked at her with affection as if the world had disappeared, leaving only the two of them. Tieu Ca stood frozen, her entire body turned to stone. The groceries slipped from her hands without her even noticing. She couldn't believe her eyes. She had forgiven. She had been patient. She had waited. All of it just to be met with such a heartless performance? Without saying a word, she turned and ran. Her steps were hurried and frantic. Her sandals nearly flew off. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling with a humiliation and pain that pierced to her very soul. And then in her panic, she stumbled on the edge of the sidewalk and fell hard onto the hot concrete. Her ankle began to bleed. Her knees were scraped raw. The sharp sting in her body was nothing compared to the shattering ache in her chest. Her heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. He ran after her, panicked, crouching down to help her up. "Tieu Ca, I'm sorry, it's not what you think." But she didn't want to hear any of it anymore. She pushed his hand away, her tear-streaked eyes now firm with resolve. "Don't explain anymore. I already gave you one chance, and now it's enough. Love doesn't need pity, and it should never have to be shared." She stood up and limped away, leaving him standing there, frozen in place, his eyes filled with regret. But it was too late. This time she didn't need him to chase after her, because that man was no longer worthy of her turning back. After all the pain of betrayal, Tieu Ca chose to let go. She held no resentment, and she didn't cling. The man she had once loved with all her heart, waited for, and forgiven was no longer worth even a single tear. He begged, he pleaded for forgiveness, but her heart was tired. She knew forgiveness was no longer an option. Because love, once stripped of trust, no matter how hard you try, becomes nothing more than broken pieces forced together by lies. And then, like a silent blow from fate, she discovered she was pregnant. She sat quietly by the window, the golden hue of sunset gently falling across her shoulders. Inside her was a storm of tangled emotions. She didn't cry. She just stayed silent for a long time, one hand resting on her belly where a new life was beginning to grow. What should I do now? It was already so hard raising one child alone. Can I really handle another? Hundreds of questions swirled in her mind, each thought clawing at her heart. But amidst the chaos, deep within her soul, she felt something miraculous. Could it be that heaven hadn't forgotten her? Could it be that this child was not a burden, but a gift, a healing presence, a small light on her lonely path, a tiny companion sent to help her keep moving forward? She smiled gently through her tears. "Hello, my baby. I have nothing left, but now I have you, and together we'll be stronger than ever." And so, day by day, she carried on working, taking care of little Han, protecting the life growing inside her, struggling forward one step at a time. She no longer wished for anything grand. All she hoped for was her children's safety, enough food to eat, enough clothes to wear, and enough strength to stay on her feet. But life still held space for kindness. Hung, the man who had always quietly stood by her side, once again became her anchor in the storm. He didn't speak much, didn't make promises. He simply stood there silently, appearing at the exact moments she needed someone most. The day she fainted at the market from exhaustion, it was Hung who rushed her to the hospital and stayed by her side all night without leaving for even a moment. The day her child, Han, came down with a fever, he didn't hesitate to travel far just to bring the right medicine, even though she had mistakenly given him the wrong prescription code. The day the rented house flooded after a heavy rain, he showed up without being asked, helping her scoop out basin after basin of water, patching every leak in the walls. Hung didn't come to replace anyone. He came as a true friend, someone who stood by her silently, protecting her without conditions, without expectations. Thanks to him, Tieu Ca began to believe that even when life is full of storms, as long as there's still light in your heart, peace can still be found. After all the instability and heartbreak, Tieu Ca slowly learned to live more gently, to love herself more. She no longer foolishly waited for those who had turned their backs on her. Instead, she poured all her heart into caring for her two little children, two fragile souls who meant the entire world to her. During those quiet, healing days, Hmong remained like a steady shadow behind her. He didn't try to force his way into her life with promises or declarations, but with the smallest, most thoughtful gestures. A bowl of warm porridge left at her doorstep in the early morning. A raincoat quietly hung outside her door on a stormy day, or simply a soft question after a long day. Are you tired? At first, Tieu Ca was cautious, shy, and withdrawn. She was afraid to love, afraid to trust, afraid that if she misplaced her trust once more, the ones who would suffer wouldn't just be her, but also the innocent children by her side. But Hmong never rushed. He understood that true love doesn't need urgency, only patience and sincerity.
Để có một Tieu Ca mạnh mẽ như hôm nay, cô ấy đã phải đánh đổi những gì? Trong cuộc sống này, không có ai tự nhiên mà mạnh mẽ, không có ai bước qua giông bão mà không một lần bị gió quật ngã. Và càng không có người phụ nữ nào trưởng thành, bản lĩnh, đầy nghị lực mà chưa từng trải qua những cay đắng đến tận cùng. Câu chuyện của Tieu Ca chính là một minh chứng như thế. Tieu Ca, một cô gái với trái tim trong trẻo và mơ ước rất đối giản dị, một mái nhà nhỏ, một người chồng tử tế, những đứa con đáng yêu và những ngày tháng yên bình bên gia đình. Nhưng đời không như mơ, cô bước vào cuộc hôn nhân với hy vọng tràn đầy để chỉ rồi nhận lại rằng nơi gọi là nhà chồng là nơi chất chứa bao nhiêu nỗi buồn, sự lạnh lẽo và bất công. Khi mang thai, Tieu Ca vẫn phải mệt mài, lai lưng ra làm lụng vất vả, không một lời hỏi han từ người thân bên nhà chồng. Nhưng những buổi chiều mưa gió, cô co ro trong căn bếp tồi tàn, nấu cơm bằng những nguyên vật liệu rẻ tiền, rồi lên cơn buồn nôn thai nghén, vừa lau nước mắt nhưng vì những lời miệt thị trách móc vô cớ, cô không được coi là con dâu mà như người làm không công trong ngôi nhà đó.